My sister's screams filled the house while my stepfather called it nothing, so I gathered evidence in silence, and what court revealed made him pay. Hi, my name's Jayla. I came home without warning. Just showed up one night, and the moment I stepped inside, nothing felt familiar. No one looked surprised. No one saved me a seat. Then I heard it, my sister's scream from behind a locked door. I called 911, but what they found inside wasn't just a bad night. It was years of secrets, of silence wrapped in smiles, of a man who called himself our stepdad but owned every room we breathed in. And the worst part wasn't just what he did to her. It was who chose not to see it. How do you come back from that? Or maybe the better question is, how do you survive in a family where the danger lives inside the walls and the ones you love most pretend it's not there? I hadn't planned on coming home that day. Truth be told, I didn't even tell anyone I was coming. After months of silence, unread texts, and calls that went straight to voicemail, I figured showing up would say more than another ignored message ever could. And besides, part of me wanted to see it with my own eyes, see what I'd been replaced with. The Uber dropped me 2 blocks down from the house. I asked the driver to turn off the music. I needed quiet. The air was cool, sharp with the first hints of autumn, and the trees lining our street were shedding their leaves like they, too, were trying to let something go. The porch light was on. That surprised me. My mom never left it on before dark. I stood on the curb for a minute, watching the windows flicker with movement. There were shadows, laughter. My backpack felt heavier than usual. It wasn't about the weight. It was the silence behind the front door. I hesitated before reaching for my old key. I still had it, even though no one told me whether I should return it. I turned it slowly, and the click it made in the lock echoed louder than I expected. The scent hit first, garlic bread, maybe, definitely something with cheese, then voices. The low murmur of conversation interrupted by laughter. Tom's, deep and throaty, like a man trying too hard to be charming. When I stepped in, no one turned. The dining table was full. 4 seats taken. My mother, her back to me. Tom holding court at the head of the table. Isolde half smiling, eyes low. And a man I didn't recognize, probably one of Tom's friends from work. Plates full, glasses clinking, jokes being passed around like dessert. No one looked up. No pause. Not even when I dropped my bag at the threshold. Finally, Mom turned. Jayla? Her voice didn't sound surprised, just confused, like I'd ruined something. We didn't think you'd come today, she added, reaching for her water glass like that would make it all more normal. I scanned the table. 4 chairs, no fifth, not even a folded napkin. There was literally no seat at the table. I stood there, one hand still on the strap of my backpack, like some kid forgotten at school pickup. It's fine, I muttered, already feeling my cheeks burn. I'll just grab something later. Tom flashed a smile that made my stomach twist. We can pull up a stool, sweetheart. It's no big deal. No, I'm good, I said, maybe too quickly. Isolde still hadn't looked at me. I made my way to the kitchen, pretending to dig through the fridge. I didn't need anything really. I just couldn't stand in that doorway any longer. I heard Mom whisper something to Tom. He chuckled low. She always had a flair for timing, huh, he said, not bothering to lower his voice. It hit me like a slap, not the words, but how easily they were spoken in front of me. I'd become an outsider in my own home. I stood behind the kitchen counter, watching them from a distance. Mom touched Tom's hand gently. Isolde barely ate, just pushed her food around. The guest laughed at something Tom said. All of them looked comfortable. I felt like someone watching a family movie they were cut out of. When they started cleaning up, I went upstairs. My room, if I could still call it that, looked different. Gone were the purple curtains I picked out when I was 15. Gone were the pictures I'd hung along the edge of the mirror. In their place were beige drapes, a neutral rug, and a made bed that didn't smell like me anymore. The closet was half filled with storage bins. A folded treadmill leaned against the far wall. It wasn't mine anymore. None of it was. I sat on the bed and glanced around, searching for something familiar. On the bookshelf, I spotted something small, metallic, a necklace. I moved closer. It was the necklace I made for Isolde last year. Beads threaded by hand, colors she loved, a charm I bought from an online store that said sisters always. I remembered wrapping it with a handwritten note. She wore it tonight, only she had thanked Tom for it. He'd regifted it or taken credit. I wasn't sure which felt worse. I held it for a moment before placing it back exactly where it had been. What was the point in saying anything? Who would believe me? Who would even care? Back in my room, I curled into the corner of the bed that still felt somewhat mine. My phone lit up with a few texts from classmates, old friends, nothing from Mom, nothing from Isolde. I opened a draft message to my friend Marcy and typed, "What if you come home and realize it's not your home anymore?" I didn't hit send. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how something could hurt so much and still feel so quiet. I stayed lying there for a while, the words I typed to Marcy still glowing on the screen of my phone. I didn't send the message. Not yet. Instead, I watched the little dot blink in the text box like it was waiting for me to finish the sentence, or maybe waiting for me to say something I hadn't dared say out loud. It was just after 8. The house had quieted, except for the dishwasher humming downstairs. I needed to stretch my legs, needed to see something, anything, that reminded me I wasn't a ghost floating through my own life. So I left the room and found myself in the hallway right outside Isolde's door. Her light was still on. I tapped gently. No answer. The door creaked open on its own, she hadn't shut it all the way. She stood there in front of her dresser, untying her ponytail with one hand while the other held a bottle of lotion. Her eyes flicked up when she noticed me, but only for a second. Then they fell back to the mirror. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You okay?" Her movement slowed. "Just tired." The words were soft, flat, and her tone was too rehearsed, like she'd had to say that 100 times before and stopped expecting anyone to question it. I didn't buy it, not even for a second. I stepped a little closer. "You sure? I mean, last year you were texting me all the time. Now I'm back and it's like you're not even here." Isolde finally turned to face me, but her arms crossed over her stomach like she was holding herself together. "It's been a long day, Jay." Jay, she only called me that when she was trying to end a conversation early. I nodded, biting back the urge to push. That's when the air shifted. Footsteps, heavier ones, approached from the stairs. Tom. He rounded the corner with a mug in his hand, wearing that same half-smile he wore at dinner. "Girls, everything all right?" he asked, tone light, almost amused. Then, placing a hand on Isolde's shoulder with casual ease, he added, "Chit-chat later, okay? Isolde needs to help me review some student essays." His hand didn't linger long, but it was enough. Isolde stiffened beneath it, just for a second, but it wasn't subtle. Not to me. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. I didn't say a word either, but I saw it. Tom turned to me. "Don't worry, Jayla. You'll have plenty of time to catch up." He walked her down the hall like a man guiding a marionette. Isolde's eyes never met mine again. I stood alone in that hallway, staring at the place where her shadow had just been. My heart felt heavier than my chest could hold. Back in my room, I sat down on the edge of the bed. I didn't even turn the light on. I just stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. Something about the way she reacted to his touch, it reminded me of something. A memory I had shoved to the back of my mind resurfaced. It was just over a year ago, a Thursday night. I had walked in on Isolde crying in the laundry room, head down, face buried in a towel. I thought maybe it was about her ex. I asked if she was okay. She had looked at me through red eyes and said, "You should just go. You always get to leave." Later that week, Tom had told Mom I needed structure, that my attitude had shifted, that I was beginning to act out. Mom, tired from working back-to-back shifts, didn't argue. I got a brochure for a private boarding school in the mail 3 days later. And just like that, I was gone. Now, lying in this half-stranger's version of my old room, I began to wonder, was I sent away because I asked the wrong question at the wrong time? My phone buzzed next to me, a new email, college update. I didn't open it. Instead, I pulled the comforter around me, tried to settle my breath, and listened to the quiet outside my door. It wasn't silent. Not really. There were muffled sounds, a soft bump, maybe someone dropping something, then murmuring, then nothing. I waited. I strained to hear something, anything. But the quiet that followed was thick, heavy, like the air had turned to syrup. I grabbed my phone and typed out a message to Isolde. "You good?" I waited. No response. I clicked the phone off and stared at the black screen. The fan turned above me. The light under my door flickered as someone moved past in the hall. Then quiet again. Something in my chest tightened. This wasn't tired. This wasn't homework. This wasn't just me overthinking. It was fear, real and breathing and right outside my door. I pulled the comforter tighter around me, heart drumming louder than I wanted to admit. And somewhere deep inside, the realization began to settle. I hadn't just come home to visit. I'd walked into a house full of people pretending everything was fine while something inside these walls was deeply, horribly wrong. 2 nights later, I found myself once again wide awake, staring at the ceiling fan rotating slowly above me. That thing had become the only constant since I came back, the only movement in this house that didn't feel calculated. I tried closing my eyes, but the silence was too loud, and not the peaceful kind. This was the sort of quiet that felt like it had something to hide. I sat up in bed, glancing at the time, 12:16 a.m. The house was dead still, but the memory of Isolde flinching under Tom's hand wouldn't leave me alone. It looped in my mind like a scene I wished I'd paused on, studied longer. Every part of me knew something was off, the way her eyes dulled, the way she avoided me. I shifted under the sheets, hoping a change in position might ease the tension gripping my chest. It didn't. Instead, I started listening more intently, to the walls, to the floorboards, to the small creaks that always come with a house this age. Then I heard it, a noise, short, sharp, muffled, not loud, but unmistakably human. I sat up straighter. My heart jumped ahead of my thoughts. Then came the sound that shattered whatever normalcy was left, an abrupt, cut-off scream. It wasn't the kind you hear in movies, full-throated and cinematic. This was low, guttural, like someone trying not to scream but unable to hold it back, like pain had broken through the dam of silence. I threw off the blanket and ran toward the hallway. Tom's door was closed. Light bled out from underneath, flickering just slightly like someone was pacing inside. I knocked once, hard. "Isolde?" No answer. I knocked again, louder. "Isolde, it's me." Still silence. I tried the doorknob, locked. I didn't think. I just started pounding. "Open the door, Tom. Open this door right now." Something thudded against the wall. Then another noise, softer, like crying. That's when I stopped knocking and grabbed my phone. My fingers were trembling so badly I hit the emergency call screen twice before I finally got it right. 911. "What's your emergency?" "My name is Jayla Maddox. I think my sister's being hurt by my stepdad. Please just send someone. It's urgent. Can you give us your address, ma'am?" I did. "Is anyone in immediate danger?" "Yes," I said. "I think she is. Please just get here." I hung up and returned to the door, pressing my ear against it. I couldn't hear anything now. Seconds passed, then minutes. The silence came back, but this time it felt like it was mocking me. Then sirens, they didn't wail loudly, just that initial far-off echo getting closer. My knees weakened in relief, but I didn't step away. I stayed there, guarding that door like it held everything I didn't know how to name. The front door opened downstairs. Voices called out, footsteps rushed up. Then Tom opened the door. He looked completely composed, shirt tucked in, hair slightly mussed but not in a suspicious way. He wore a look of mild concern, like someone who had been inconvenienced but wanted to stay polite. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" he asked, like I was the one overreacting. Behind him, Isolde sat on the floor, legs drawn to her chest. Her face was blotchy, eyes red. Her sweater, torn at the neckline, hung off one shoulder. She didn't speak, didn't move. 2 officers stepped past Tom before he could say another word. "Sir, step back, please." Tom complied, hands raised, doing his best model citizen impression. One of the officers, a woman, knelt beside Isolde. "Are you all right, honey?" Isolde's lips moved, but I couldn't hear her. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. The second officer pulled Tom aside. He began his usual routine. I recognized it from when he spoke to neighbors, teachers, even Mom. Calm, polished, sympathetic. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said. "She slipped. I told her to lie down while I got ice. But it didn't match what I saw, what I heard." They brought Isolde downstairs. One of the paramedics wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Another guided her outside. She didn't look back. I followed but stopped at the threshold. I didn't want Tom behind me. He stepped up and, with the nerve of a man who'd rehearsed his innocence 1,000 times, said, "You made quite the scene, Jayla. Are you sure this is the kind of attention you want?" I turned to him. My voice didn't shake. "You're not going to get away with this." He smiled. "You think they haven't tried this before?" Then he walked away, cool as ever, to give his statement. Back inside, the living room was still. Mom sat on the couch, arms crossed tightly. She hadn't spoken a word since the cops arrived. I waited for her to say something, anything. Finally, she stood. "This is a mess," she muttered, heading for the stairs. "That's all you have to say?" I asked, incredulous. "Your daughter was crying on the floor. She said she slipped," Mom snapped. "And maybe if you hadn't been so dramatic." I cut her off. "She didn't slip, Mom." She turned, but I wasn't done. She flinched when he touched her. She thanked him for a necklace I gave her. She looked terrified. Mom just shook her head. "You've been gone a long time, Jayla. You don't know what this family's been through." She walked away. I spent the rest of the night pacing, thinking, playing the scream over in my mind, the click of the lock, the look in Isolde's eyes. At 4 a.m. I heard a knock on my door, soft, barely there. I opened it. Isolde stood there in pajamas, hair pulled back, eyes still raw. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Why now, Jayla?" I didn't know what to say. She looked at me like someone asking for permission to be angry. "Why didn't you come home sooner?" I didn't answer her. I didn't even breathe. Isolde's words, soft, brittle, hung between us in the hallway like a cracked mirror I wasn't ready to look into. I wanted to tell her that I tried, that I wrote, that I called, that every time I thought of stepping back through that door it felt like walking into a trap I couldn't name. But I didn't say any of that, because what did it matter now? She stood there for a few more seconds, then turned and walked back to her room, closing the door without a sound. By morning, the air had turned heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I went downstairs barefoot, trying to ease the weight in my chest, and found the kitchen already alive with the scent of eggs and toast. Mom stood at the stove, humming like it was any other morning, like last night didn't just happen. Tom wasn't there. Isolde's bedroom door had remained closed since before sunrise. Mom didn't look at me when I entered. She just pointed to the counter. "Coffee's fresh." I poured a cup, hand steady out of spite. "He's not here." "No," she said, flipping a pancake. "He went to the station this morning to give a statement voluntarily." I leaned against the fridge. "They had a reason to show up, Mom." "You heard her. You saw her face." Mom turned around, spatula in hand, her eyes sharp and cold. "What I saw was you banging on a locked door in the middle of the night, accusing your stepfather of God knows what in front of the neighbors and 2 police officers. You embarrassed us." "Embarrassed us?" I repeated, nearly choking on the words. She was on the floor shaking. Her shirt was torn. "That's not a misunderstanding." She said she slipped. "No," I said, voice rising. "That's what he told her to say. And you're eating it up like it's gospel." Mom stared at me, her jaw tight. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You're trying to destroy this family." The sentence hit like a slap. "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "He already did that. I'm just the one who finally called it out." She didn't respond. She just turned back to the stove. An hour later, I got a call from Officer Quinn asking me to come down and give a formal statement. They'd already spoken with Tom and my mother. I didn't ask if Isolde had gone. I didn't need to. The drive to the station felt like floating through fog. Everything outside the car looked too normal: joggers, school buses, someone walking a dog, as if the world had no idea how ugly the inside of my house had become. At the station, the officer took my report with a calm professionalism that didn't match the chaos inside me. I told them everything: what I saw, what I heard, what Isolde whispered. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. When I was done, the officer nodded and handed me a tissue I hadn't asked for. In the lobby, I caught a glimpse of Tom talking to another officer. His back was straight, his hands folded, his tone friendly. If I hadn't known better, I'd think he was giving a lecture at a PTA meeting. I didn't approach him. I didn't have to. I knew what his version would be: my stepdaughter has a history of emotional instability. She's always been dramatic. And they'd nod. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would believe him. I returned home to a house that no longer pretended. Mom sat in the living room, arms crossed, eyes glued to some talk show that buzzed just loud enough to drown out conversation. I passed her without speaking. Upstairs, I found my room the same way I left it: sterile, impersonal. The bins in the closet looked more at home here than I did. I sat on the bed and stared at my suitcase. I'd never unpacked. Mom knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. "You should have asked before coming back." I turned slowly. "Excuse me? This is my house, Jayla. You can't just barge in after all this time, stir everything up, then expect us to, what? Start over?" I stood. "You're right. It is your house. But don't pretend like I left because I wanted to." She folded her arms. "You're twisting everything." "No, I'm finally seeing it straight." She left without closing the door. Later that night, I opened my journal. The pages were mostly empty, a few half-started entries from months ago, scribbled thoughts I didn't finish. I wrote in bold, clear letters: "They want me to disappear, but I won't." Downstairs, the door opened. Tom was back. I waited a moment, then went down. He stood by the counter, a glass of water in his hand, like it was his kitchen and I was just visiting. "You think this is over?" he asked, not turning around. I didn't answer. He turned, smirking. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jayla. Be careful who you cross." I stepped closer. "You can fool her. You won't fool me." He leaned in slightly, his smile colder than I'd ever seen. "You'll regret this, little girl." I met his eyes. "Not as much as you will." He walked away after saying it, like "you'll regret this, little girl" was just another line from a parent trying to teach discipline. I didn't flinch, not while he was looking, not even when the door clicked behind him. But I felt it later, in the weight that settled into my stomach, in the ache that clung to my hands long after I'd curled them into fists and let them go. 2 days passed without anyone addressing the night that cracked this house open. Mom stopped making full meals. The refrigerator was filled with leftovers no one touched. We passed each other like strangers in a rental home. Isolde's door didn't open once. I knocked once the morning after, lightly. No answer. Knocked again that night. Still nothing. I started leaving short notes, just a sentence or two: "I'm here. I'm sorry. Are you okay?" None came back. And still no noise, no light under her door. Just a sealed silence. The third day, I was cleaning up laundry that somehow still fell to me when I noticed her bed didn't look made, not just messy, but uncharacteristically rumpled, like she'd either been sleeping in her clothes or hadn't moved at all. I stood by her doorway, not trying to open it this time, not yet. I didn't want her to shut me out harder. I just wanted some proof that she was still herself, still reachable. That's when I noticed the corner of something poking out from under her mattress, a tiny edge of a worn spiral notebook. The cardboard faded, one corner chewed from time or stress. It looked like the kind of journal she used to keep in middle school, full of bad poems and drawings of girls with long limbs and shadows for eyes. I hesitated, then reached for it. The first few pages were torn out. The next ones were covered in frantic writing, most of it scribbled over, sentences half finished, but one entry caught me. "Night, locked, couldn't breathe. He said not to tell, told me to pretend." The words blurred in places. A few letters smudged like tears or sweat had hit the page before the ink dried. My hands trembled as I closed it. I held it for a few seconds more, then walked back to my room. I sat on my bed, placed the notebook beside the necklace I gave her, the one Tom took credit for. That necklace had become something like an altar, a place to put all the things I wasn't ready to say out loud. Later that day, I brought the notebook to the police station. Officer Quinn met me at the side entrance and took me into her office without any small talk. "I found this in my sister's room," I said, handing it over. I don't think she meant for me to see it, but I couldn't ignore it. She nodded slowly, flipping through a few pages. Her face stayed calm, professional, but her knuckles tightened around the spine of the book. "I appreciate you bringing this," she said. "We'll log it as evidence." She paused, then added, "We also recovered the camera we discussed, the one Tom installed in the hallway supposedly for security." "And?" I asked. She sighed. "Footage was wiped. Hard reset on the device. Could have been a malfunction, but we're treating it as intentional." I swallowed, the taste of defeat sharp on my tongue. "So, what now?" "We build a case," she said. "Even without that footage, it's harder, but not impossible." I nodded and left the station, gripping my coat tighter around my shoulders even though it wasn't that cold. That evening, I noticed a shift in the air at school. Not everyone knew, of course, but some did, the counselors for sure, a few teachers. Word travels fast in small communities, especially when you're not trying to make it travel at all. During fourth period, a counselor pulled me aside. Miss Finch, young, awkward, new. She smiled in that overly cautious way people do when they think they're helping but really just want you to sit down and stop making things complicated. "I just wanted to check in, Jayla," she said. "We've noticed you seem withdrawn. Is everything okay at home?" I gave her a look. "Define okay." She cleared her throat. "Your stepfather, he reached out, expressed concern." "Did he?" I said, already knowing the answer. "Yes. He said you've been struggling since coming back. That maybe you were reacting to unresolved grief, your father." My jaw locked. "Don't talk about him." She blinked. "Sorry, I didn't mean." I stood up. "I'm fine. You don't have to go through this alone." I turned at the door. "I already am." Later that night, as I sat on the edge of my bed trying to process it all, I thought about how the system protects people like Tom, people who smile right, dress right, speak like they're always in control. People who know exactly how far they can push and still get away with it. I knew it wouldn't end here, that he wouldn't let it. I checked Isolde's door, still closed. I took a sticky note from my desk and wrote carefully. "You don't have to talk. Just listen. I believe you and I'm not leaving." I slipped it under her door and went back to my room, back to the notebook, back to the necklace, back to the place where hope and fury coexisted like old roommates forced to share a bed again. A week slid by, thick with tension that clung to the walls like smoke. I woke every day to the same silence, moved through the house like an unwelcome guest, and went to sleep in a room that still didn't feel like mine. But I stayed. I needed to be a presence, even if I wasn't being heard. And the note I'd slipped under Isolde's door remained untouched, not folded, not moved, not acknowledged. Still, I left another the next day and the day after that. At school, I started feeling the shift, not overt, not outright, but subtle whispers as I passed, eyes that didn't linger long enough to be obvious but didn't look away fast enough to pretend they weren't watching. People knew something, or at least they thought they did. It was Wednesday when the guidance counselor called me in. Ms. Ralston, late 40s, with a wardrobe that tried too hard to blend in and a voice that sounded like she was always on the edge of apologizing for existing. "Jayla, honey, do you have a minute?" I followed her into the office, sat across from her at a round table with a stress ball in the middle. The blinds were drawn. It felt like being invited into a conversation where the outcome had already been decided. She folded her hands. "I just wanted to check in, things at home. We've heard there's been some tension." I said nothing. She continued, "Sometimes when we go through changes or feel unsupported, it's easy to project our discomfort onto those around us, even those who care about us deeply." My jaw tightened. "You think I made this up?" She blinked. "No, that's not what I'm saying. But that's exactly what you're saying. I'm saying trauma can look different in different people. Maybe what you're experiencing isn't exactly what's happening. Emotions are powerful. I didn't hallucinate the police showing up at my house, I snapped. I didn't imagine my sister crying in a corner. Ms. Ralston shifted in her seat, still wearing that patient look that made me want to break something. We're just trying to make sure you're supported, she said, and that you're not letting personal grief cloud your perception. Personal grief. She meant my dad. I stood up. I'm good. Thanks. I walked out of that room shaking, not from fear, but from rage so hot it made my fingers go numb. That night, I watched as the rumors exploded. An anonymous blog post popped up accusing me of being an attention seeker, someone who'd always created chaos. It listed out moments from my past completely twisted, how I used to get into arguments with teachers, how I'd once slapped a kid for making fun of Isolde in 8th grade. None of the context, just ammunition. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and hit record. I didn't rehearse. I didn't write a script. I looked directly into the camera and said, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to speak because no one else is. I talked about silence, about the way abuse hides not in screaming but in quiet glances, in the way people flinch when no one else notices, in the way girls are taught not to cause a scene. I didn't name names. I ended it with a question: if no one listens, will you still speak? I uploaded it anonymously, no tags, no identifiers, just truth. The next morning, it had 50 views. That night, 300. By the weekend, it hit over 1,000. My sister went through this too. I didn't say anything when I should have. I'm sorry. I believe you. That Monday, I brought Isolde's notebook to Ms. Cartwright, my old English teacher. She was the one who got me into writing, who once told me that words, when placed right, could tear down walls. I handed it to her, explained what it was, what I thought it meant. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the smeared ink, the frantic handwriting. Then she looked at me with a sadness that didn't belong in someone who once called herself a protector. I'm sorry, she said. It's just not enough. These are incomplete thoughts. There's no context. It wouldn't hold up as anything more than personal reflection. I stared at her. She wrote, he said not to tell. What more do you need? She shook her head. It's not about what I need. It's about what's admissible. I left the classroom more disappointed than surprised. That night, I got a text from Officer Quinn: don't stop. The more you speak, the more cracks you make. And somehow that meant more than any teacher's apology. He's done this before. You're not crazy. Check Oak Ridge Middle 2015. It came from a private profile, no name, no picture. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. If what that message said was true, this wasn't just about me or even just about Isolde. It was bigger, deeper, and I wasn't going to stop. I didn't sleep, not even a nap. I spent most of that night curled up on the edge of my bed with the light from my laptop burning into my eyes and my heart trying to stay steady against the rising tide of rage. Morning came like it was trying to apologize for what the night uncovered. I didn't wait for breakfast or for Mom to make her usual circuit of ignoring me. Instead, I opened my laptop again, this time with a clear direction. I started digging. Oak Ridge Middle had a community page, old newsletters, district notes, the kind of bureaucratic fluff no one ever reads. But hidden in the November 2015 bulletin was a quiet line under the staff transitions section. Mr. Tom Maddox will be departing Oak Ridge to pursue new opportunities closer to home. We thank him for his service. That alone wasn't a red flag, but it was the timing that got me. My daughter's uncomfortable around her science teacher. Says he makes weird jokes and stands too close. Other girls have said the same. Not sure what to do. He's so well liked. Teacher gone. No investigation. Just gone. Nobody wants to say why. My hands curled into fists. It wasn't just us. That afternoon, I checked my inbox and found a message from a name I didn't recognize, Caden Rowe. The subject line just said, I should have said something. Then inside the message, it read, I was at Oak Ridge in 2015. I was one of Tom's tutoring kids. I saw Isolde once. She was crying in the hall after a meeting with him. I didn't ask. I didn't want to get involved. That silence helped him. I won't be silent again. I stared at those words, letting them wash over me. I messaged him back. We agreed to talk the next day, and when we did, I didn't have to pull a single word out of him. He confessed what he remembered clearly, the way Tom would compliment girls on their mature posture, the subtle touches passed off as encouragement, the jokes that weren't appropriate no matter how you spun them. Back then, I thought if no one else was saying anything, maybe I was overreacting, he told me. Now I know that's what he counts on. That night at dinner, I tried to bring it up to Mom. I found something, I said, pushing my plate away untouched. She didn't look up from her phone. About Oak Ridge Middle, I continued. Back in 2015, there were girls. He left quietly. Her fingers stopped moving. She looked at me for the first time all week. You've been snooping again. I'm not snooping. I'm connecting dots you refuse to see. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. You are digging for drama, Jayla. You don't care about this family. You never have. You just want to burn everything down so you can feel important. I stood too, slower. You're mad because I'm doing what you should have done, protected her. Her mouth opened like she was going to argue, then closed again. Behind me, Tom stepped into the room. You're making enemies you can't see, he said, voice smooth. Good, I shot back. Let them come into the light. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next day, I requested to speak at the school board meeting. They were holding it virtually, streaming live for the community. I told them I had information that concerned a former educator who now worked within the Fort Collins district. They granted me 5 minutes. When the meeting started, I logged in early, checked the video and mic twice. My heart beat in my ears, but I knew I had to stay steady. When it was my turn, I began. My name is Jayla Maddox. I'm a student at Fort Collins High School, and I have something to share about a man who should not be near children. I was 3 minutes in, just about to bring up the Oak Ridge Parent Forum posts, when the screen went black. The stream froze on my end. Everything looked fine, but I checked the YouTube link on my phone. It was down. Video unavailable, it said. I refreshed. Nothing. Within seconds, my connection to the board meeting platform dropped completely. My phone lit up with texts. Did it cut out? Was that intentional? Jayla, you okay? I stared at the screen. My hands had gone cold. 10 minutes later, Officer Quinn called. I saw what happened, she said. Your stream was tampered with. By who? We don't know yet, but we may have something. I sat down, pressing the phone closer to my ear. You remember that smart speaker in your living room? She said. Yeah, it uploads backups. My breath caught. We found audio. It was a gray morning, the kind that hangs low over the city like a warning no one wants to say out loud. We arrived at the courthouse just after 8. Isolde sat beside me in the back of Officer Quinn's car, her hands tucked under her thighs, eyes locked on the blur of buildings passing outside. She hadn't said a word since we left the house. Neither had I. In the front seat, Quinn made a few quiet calls, confirming our arrival time and reminding someone, maybe a clerk or the prosecutor, to prepare the file. We found audio. Those words echoed in my head. The night before, Quinn had told me the smart speaker in our living room, an afterthought purchase Mom once made on Black Friday, had been auto-saving short clips to cloud storage. One of those clips captured a piece of what happened that night. Not everything, but enough. Inside the courthouse, everything smelled sterile, coffee, dust, worry. It clung to the walls, clung to our clothes. A bailiff led us to a holding room while proceedings wrapped up from a previous case. Are you ready? I asked Isolde, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't look at me, just nodded once. The door opened 20 minutes later. We were called into the courtroom. I thought I'd feel nervous or sick or something more dramatic. But when I walked down the aisle of pew-like severity and saw Tom sitting there in his pale gray suit, calm as ever, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. He turned, caught my gaze, and smiled like none of this was real, like I was a child playing courtroom and he was humoring me. The prosecutor stood, introduced the evidence, and then Officer Quinn walked up to the bench and presented the audio. A bailiff pressed play. It started with muffled movement, furniture creaking, a thump, then his voice. You'll shut your mouth if you know what's good for you. Silence, then Isolde's voice, small, cracked, broken. Please stop. The courtroom went still. No papers shuffled. No one whispered. Even the judge leaned slightly forward, his expression unreadable. The audio ended. Tom didn't move. Quinn stepped back. I turned to Isolde, who was staring down at her lap. Her hands trembled, but slowly she stood. Miss Maddox, the judge said, you may speak. She stepped toward the center, her voice quiet at first. He said no one would believe me. She glanced at Tom, then at Mom, who sat 2 rows back, frozen. He said I was imagining things, that it was my fault when he came into my room, that if I said anything I'd be responsible for tearing the family apart. She paused, swallowing, her chin lifted. But Jayla believed me. She was the only one who did, and that saved my life. For the first time, she looked at me, her eyes full of pain, but also something steadier, something healing. She believed me first. The judge gave a brief nod, then turned to the prosecution. Mom stood, and her hand shook as she spoke. I chose comfort over truth, she said. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe my home could be poisoned from the inside. And because of that, my daughter suffered. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Then, without prompting, she walked to the clerk and handed over a document. I didn't need to read it to know what it was, divorce papers. When the judge read the sentence, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Thomas Maddox, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in prison. You will not be eligible for parole for 20. Tom stood still as the bailiff approached. His expression didn't change, not even when the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. As he was led past us, he looked at me one last time. No words, just that same quiet, smug smirk he wore the first day he met us. But this time I didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps, microphones, cameras, questions. Isolde stepped forward before they could speak. My name is Isolde Maddox, she said, loud enough for the cameras to catch but steady, strong. But from today forward, I choose to be Isolde Hart, after my father. And this, she reached for my hand, gripping it tightly, this is the only family I trust. They tried to ask more, but she didn't give them time. We walked down the steps together, shoulder to shoulder. That evening, back at the house, Mom, Melvina, was in the kitchen moving slowly through the living room, clearing out anything of Tom's, trophies, certificates, framed awards. The last to go was the wedding photo. She hesitated a moment, then dropped it into a cardboard box and taped it shut. I should have known, she said softly. I think part of me did, but knowing and admitting aren't the same. I said nothing, just let her speak. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I broke. You don't have to fix it alone, I said. We sat in silence for a while, the soft buzz of the heater humming through the vents. The worst was over, but the weight of what we'd survived would take longer to leave. Still, it was a start. The press conference ended before noon, but it was well past dusk by the time we finally made it home. Home was a stretch, not in the sentimental sense, but in the physical one. Our new place was barely more than a second-floor rental above a worn-out dental office. The waiting room chairs below us creaked louder than the heater in our apartment, which was saying something. The blinds didn't fully close, and the linoleum near the sink had peeled into a corner that refused to stay down, but the rent was affordable. And for the first time in what felt like years, the quiet didn't feel like something to fear. It had been a month since the verdict, a month since the courtroom walls bore witness to truths too long buried, a month since the world had finally stopped pretending not to see, since names were spoken out loud that had lived in whispers, since I stood at a microphone with trembling hands and a steady voice and said what needed saying. And now here we were, still standing. The days since then had passed in the kind of fragile rhythm that defines early recovery. Some days felt like progress, bright, still, promising. Others were jagged, brittle, prone to crumbling at the slightest reminder of the past. But even then, the pieces of our lives were starting to settle into place, maybe not neatly, and definitely not without cracks, but still they were settling, one breath, one step at a time. Inside the apartment, Mom, Melvina, was in the kitchen, not rushing, not pacing, not trying to outrun a nervous system on fire. She moved like a person who finally had room to slow down. Her gestures were small and deliberate, the kind you don't notice unless you've seen what chaos does to a body. She placed 3 mismatched mugs on the table, all of them filled with that cheap, syrupy hot chocolate mix she used to keep in bulk when Isolde and I were little. We used to beg for it in winter, pretending it was a magic potion that made snow fall faster, back when winter still meant something magical, back before everything fractured. Tonight there were no illusions, no forced smiles, no pretending. But for once, we didn't need to pretend. On the wall above the couch, I'd hung a small wooden frame earlier that week. Inside was a note from Dad, not the polished kind someone writes for a special occasion, but one of his offhand messages scrawled on lined notebook paper in blue ink. I'd found it in a drawer after he died, folded so many times the paper threatened to split. "You see what others won't, never forget that," he wrote when I was 10, after I told him what I saw, the neighbor kicking his dog when no one else was watching. Everyone else had dismissed it, brushed it off. Maybe the dog was being aggressive. You probably misunderstood. But not Dad. He believed me without question. And that belief became a seed I carried, even when it felt like everything else had been stripped away. Isolde sat beside me on the floor, her back against the couch, legs curled up beneath her like she used to when we were kids late night watching cartoons. She hadn't said much since court, but she was here every day with her presence, her silence, her stillness, and that was enough. Malvina dried her hands on a dish towel and suddenly said, "We should get a tree." Isolde opened one eye. "You hate trees." I hated his trees, Mom clarified. Those plastic ones with color-coded branches and lights that always blinked at different speeds. They looked like department store displays. No soul. She paused. I miss the real ones, the smell, the mess, the frustration of untangling lights that somehow tied themselves into knots every year. "I can get one," I offered. "There's probably a lot left." "It's already mid-December. So," she said, shrugging. "It's not about the calendar anymore. We didn't get the tree that night. We didn't bake sugar cookies or hang ornaments. There was no festive garland or holiday movie marathons. But we lit a candle. We put on an old record, something scratchy and slow that filled the space with warmth. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. A holiday with no glitter, no guests, no expectations, but full of presents. And somehow it was more than enough. A few nights later, winter settled deeper into the neighborhood. The air turned brittle, laced with the faint smell of wood smoke and pine. I woke up at 3 a.m., not from a nightmare, not from any loud sound, just woke. My chest was tight, the kind of tight that no breath could quite fix. I crept into the kitchen for water. The floor was cold under my socks. Isolde's door was closed and locked. She always locked it, not because she was afraid of us. It wasn't fear anymore. It was routine, a way of claiming control, of creating a boundary. I respected it. In the living room, I saw Mom asleep on the couch, curled up like a question mark, her face streaked with dried tears. She didn't know I was there, and I didn't wake her. I just stood there for a moment, letting the stillness wrap around us both. Then I turned and went back to bed. Healing isn't a straight line. Everyone says that, but few understand what it really means. It means some days are steady, others sting. It means feeling joy, then guilt for the joy. It means crying in the shower even after the court date is over. It means laughing at a meme and wondering if you're allowed to feel light again. It means watching someone else sleep through their pain and knowing you can't take it away. The next morning, I checked my email and found a name I hadn't expected, Caden. The subject line was blank, but inside was a message I didn't know I needed. Jayla. I watched the press conference. I know I never said this before, but thank you for being louder than my fear. You didn't just help your sister, you helped me find my voice too. I joined a local survivor group. I've started speaking to students. Small stuff, but it matters. One kid asked me if people will ever stop blaming victims. I told him the truth, not always, but someone has to speak anyway. You reminded me that it counts. It always counts. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. That message was the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding until it finally leaves you. It didn't erase the past, but it marked something new, something forward. A few days later, I walked to the Fort Collins Community Center and signed up to volunteer for their winter clothing drive. Just a few hours a week, nothing major. The sign-up sheet asked for an emergency contact. I paused. Then, for the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. I wrote, Isolde Hart. And underneath, without thinking, almost instinctively, I added, sibling of Isolde Hart. 2 simple lines, just ink on a form. But to me, it meant everything. We weren't healed. We weren't fixed. Life hadn't snapped back like a rubber band to the way it used to be. But we weren't surviving anymore either. We were living, together. And for now, that was enough. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones buried right inside our own homes, masked by routine, hidden by silence, and ignored by the people we expect to protect us.